when you struggle with disordered eating, it never really leaves you. You can go through moments of recovery and you can, think that you're getting better habits, but the voices of somebody who has anorexia, bulimia, or even the idea of trying to eat quote unquote perfectly, those voices are always there. So those voices for me would come and they would go. And in production, being in front of lots of actresses, being in front of just the idea of doing certain things to fit in costumes was the norm. And that started to really affect me again. I thought I was past it. It wasn't my profession. I wasn't in front of the camera, but I was seeing it normalized. So now, I grew up, I think growing up having, comments from my mom or seeing certain things in the tabloids, now I had a front row seat to it in person.
And I'm assuming it wasn't on Fuller House, right?
No, I mean...
Because I got to say, I know Jody, I know Candace, and I know Dave, and I just don't think anyone would stand for that kind of
No.
Because they've just been through it, they've had babies, their bodies are, not stick figures. So it's no. I just feel like there seems like there would have been a body positivity, but there are certain productions that truly do glorify that stuff.
Yes. So, of course, I'm not necessarily speaking of Fuller House. I worked on many shows, right. But just being in that environment, even writing my own stories, that's what these voices would do. So I feel like my issues kind of kept simmering again. Okay. And I became more fascinated about it than worried about my own health. I thought, why is this happening, and why am I still falling into this all or nothing mentality with food?
Got it.
And I knew there had to be some sort of a solution. So I looked into holistic schools because the Western medicine options were still, I was looking at their programs and it was still talking about things that triggered me, like the food pyramid and certain proportions of things, and not really looking at anything else except the food on your plate. So what really drew me to the holistic practice was it looked at your genetics, it looked at your stress levels, it looked at your environmental exposures. It looked at so many things that you wouldn't even factor into what makes you a healthy person. Mm-hmm. So anyways, I shared my story of that, and I said, I think I'm going to leave production and I'm going to go back to school. And I think I can help you. And so,
oh my gosh,
wow,
exactly you were like, you will be my first patient.
Yeah. And it literally was that.
Yeah.
And
wow.
I've been off all medication for 7 years.
Wow.
I have very few flare-ups. And when I do, they're just not as aggressive.
Well, and also mentally, I think, like she was saying, if her approach is in all these ways, I'm sure that transfers over to the way that you teach, right? Yes. And practice.
100%.
Yeah.
So we're talking about inflammation. We're talking about disordered eating. We're talking about lupus. There's so many things that I can go for here. And it's all so cool because women don't talk about their bodies enough in a healthy way, in a communal, healthy way. I know women who are scared to talk about, there's a lot of women who are concerned about talking about miscarriages and they want to try to, I had a friend just share with me something like that, and I was, I've had 2 healthy pregnancies. I've had other things happen in my life, right? But I just knew I couldn't say much to her. Mm-hmm. I just wanted to be present for her because she needed to feel heard. Yeah. Because we've, as women, especially when we're talking about our health, it becomes a sort of a minefield where we don't know if we're going to offend or if somebody can relate to us. But in the moment that my friend was sharing that, I was like, I just want to be present. And I just want to be there for her. And I don't want to try to act like I know everything. Yeah. I'm going to stumble my way through this conversation, but at least I'll be present. And so with lupus, the only thing I know about lupus is Selena Gomez has lupus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's as much as I know. Yeah. And so lupus is kind of this mysterious thing that of course we know creates this chronic pain. Mm-hmm. And then with disordered eating recently, Jeanette McCurdy's book came out and I listened to that, and the back half of that book is very triggering. Yeah. So I would warn anybody from or understanding that that's a part of that.
Right.
And she talks about a lot of what you just mentioned. You're so, like you were saying, you're almost like you stepped out of it and you were like, let me think about this critically. And so did you just have like a higher power, or like what was it that you feel like you were called to like start to help people?
I think it started that I wanted to help myself and figure out if it was possible and then share it with others. And I knew that there had to be some sort of a solution with balance, because I found that when I would do, extreme eating, whether it's one end of the spectrum or the other, it never worked, right? Which seems obvious, but people keep doing it because they're so afraid, and
Groomed.
rightfully so.
They're groomed.
Yeah.
The diet industry.
Exactly, which is a $33 billion industry.
And what does that say, do you feel like?
That everything goes back to money. And if you have the tools in order to help yourself become the best that you can be for you, taking apart, like Mel said from the very beginning, we're all so different, right? Bio-individuality is like key. And so we have to treat our bodies as such, which means we can all have the same cup of coffee and it's going to affect every one of us differently.
Yeah, it's
right?
going to metabolize differently,
Yeah.
or someone is going to
Because your whole lifestyle goes into play when you're talking about it. And so I think if you keep people sick, you're able to sell more products.
That's a market.
Yeah.
That's a marketplace.
And if you think about it, two different people walk into the room and they sit down and they have the same meal. Those two different people just had completely different experiences.
two different meals.
Yeah.
Same food.
Yeah, exactly. And so one person was stuck in traffic and they are going through a hard time with their spouse. And the other person walked in from a yoga class and they're super relaxed and they had a balanced breakfast and their blood sugar is stable.
But they're drinking too much water and the acid is
I know, let's get there. But yeah, and so it's going to look completely different for those reasons. And the diet industry is never going to point that out because that doesn't work for a protocol.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a really great point. It's like a narrative that they feed into, right? It's like the magazines or whatever, or like when we were briefly talking about what do they call them? Like Slim Fasts and Weight Watchers, which I don't know if you wanted to mention about.
Of course. Yeah. So when I was 16, I did Weight Watchers with my mom. And that, it's interesting because before I came on, I called her and I said, I'm going to talk about this. And our memories of the situation could not be more different. And I felt that was actually worth talking about now, because I think there's a big generational gap, especially raising generations now. We have a different set of expectations for things and experiences that can affect our children for the long run. And I think she remembers it as she was trying to help me. And she was like, yeah, we'll do this together. Like,
did she think it was like nutritional? Like, did she think that was?
So I think she did. I think she thought it was going to help me as a teenager figure out how to be healthy. But what I remember is a woman sitting, and I know the program has evolved a lot since the early 2000s, but I remember sitting in a circle and a bunch of women talking about, what they ate that week. And I remember one woman said, I ate 4 bananas because there were 0 points, like in a sitting. And in my head, I'm thinking, okay, that doesn't seem quite right.
It seems crazy.
That seems a little excessive.
A little imbalanced. Yeah.
So something like Weight Watchers at the time, again, it's all about equating your points and giving yourself these rules to get to a certain number. And numbers, as anybody who's struggled with disordered eating, is like the epicenter, right?
Which essentially is just another form of calorie counting.
Yes.
It is.
Right? Yeah.
You're right. And also, it's currency. It's currency. It's like when you go back to the money, you're talking about the $33 billion. This is a little off topic, but like TikTok and just in general with social media, the entire idea is to keep people hooked and looking at stuff as long as possible, and the conversion rates and like all of that stuff. It's not the idea usually with content isn't let's make the best, highest form of content with the most substantial messaging. Like what we're talking about might actually help some people.
Yeah.
That's
I
the
hope
goal.
so.
I know that to be true with you
Yeah.
guys. Because that's the intention of you guys being called to come on, and I'm happy to have the platform to do that. So it's like a meeting of the minds in that way. But most content is not, optimized for that.
Yeah, and it goes back to to what you're saying of keeping people hooked. It's kind of that same thing. Well, when you create a diet, then you're able to slap your logo on a front of a product so that it's a convenient way for people to just, while they're shopping, grab that thing that says that on the front, rather than like really diving into the ingredients and what are you putting in your body.
Thanks so much for checking out this clip for the Vulnerable Podcast. For the full episode, go ahead and check out my YouTube channel. That link is in the description. Thanks again.